Let's see what this is about. Also by Bellular. Just WTF are Blizzard supposed to do? WoW's eternal problem. Oof, man. I'm always astonished hearing people talk classes as a Final 14 player. It's like hearing people theorize a raid by using literal math that would get you a job in a well-playing career. Meanwhile, in FF, your classes stay the same, and if it changes, it's an entire overhaul that's seen as a good thing most of the time. Most astonishing people talk. What? Let's try to think of FF14 classes as just a collection of skills designed to do one thing, a series of buttons that may or may not do more damage than another series of buttons. I find the class design way more interesting in WoW, and I say this as a BLM main. The way classes work in FF14 is annoying. They're purpose-built for their role and offer very little flavorful, fun, cool, or useful skills beyond how they slot into your rotation. I'm trying to understand how this is different from WoW. Because classes should be balanced individually and mathematically according to their action economy, how many presses you do, and damage-wise, how much damage these generate. The WoW and Fantasy are the same in that regard. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. All of their classes and specs are purpose-built for their role and offer very little flavorful, fun, cool, or useful skills beyond how they slot in your rotation. F14 embraced this and focused this uniqueness of jobs into their visuals and focused on balancing all jobs to be within a decent range of each other, that you bring what you want to play to any content, since everything is viable in all content, where many of the useful skills outside of the rotation that you would find on a WoW class are instead made baseline for everyone regardless. You do not need a mage to portal people around. Everyone can teleport where they want to go. You do not need a warlock to summon someone into a raid. Everyone teleports into the raid, and as you do things on a per fight basis, you can just leave the instance if someone needs to drop and be replaced. Not sure I agree with this. WoW embraced borrowed power systems to try to add in the flavorful, fun, cool, or useful stuff, which resulted more often than not where you grab the mathematically best stuff, and class balance has such a wide range that people are shunned for playing the class they enjoy if it is not one of the devs' favorites, because they will be so weak in comparison to the devs' favorites that they are a deficit to bring on the team, increasing the HP on a raid boss more than they can make up in DPS. I don't agree on this Warlock point. Warlock does bring the gate, mages bring their blinks, and so here's like immunities most classes have. So here's the flavorful stuff in WoW is basically certain raid buffs, right? Lust, even though a lot of classes have Lust now. Warrior Shout is unique, so it's cool and fun, I guess. DK Grips, cool and fun, I guess. Warlock Gates, cool and fun. It's like off the top of my head, I'm just throwing some stuff, right? But it's like soaks and stuff, rogues, hunters, mages, paladins, like almost every class can really have a soak type of cooldown, right? Not almost every, but like at least half that I can just like think from the top of my head. However, I don't think that's a good thing. That's overall, it's not a good thing. Because then you're forced to bring these classes, right? And I just don't like the forced to bring a class. Forced to bring an armor set, I would agree. So for example, all clothies DPS will do the same thing. So mages and warlocks would have the gate and have the lust and have the thing, right? It's like all of the plates would have the grips, would have the charges, stuff like that, would have the shouts, right? It's like stuff like that. I think would be much healthier for the game. And like whatever, how they play is different, but the utility that they bring should probably be a standard. Not necessarily like that doesn't have to be as good, but like a version of. But I never tried FF. I think my Sage shields and can heal by doing damage for every damage ability. Whenever the shield's broken, I get more AoE charges, which rewards me for not over-refreshing. My White Mage is fully offensive. I give those that needed regeneration and then spam AoE stuns until more healing is needed too. Very different style of plays. I just disagree. WoW has so many skills and abilities that do more than simply add damage to a fleshy combo, like the Warlock Portals, DK's Death Grip, Hunter's Misdirect. There are rough equivalents in FF14, but there really isn't much creativity in terms of how it is used. There are only a handful of viable tactics for each comp in FF14. WoW feels so much more flexible. No, I'd say it feels mandatory. Warlocks are mostly useless because you only get one use of them before you are hit with a massive cooldown to lock you out from using them or even using another Warlock Portal. So I would say mostly useless in some fights, but some fights you pretty much need them. Like, it just makes the fight so much easier. Which is why raid teams don't really use Warlock Portals as part of raid tactics outside of very niche one-time mechanic cheese. Yep. For the most part, it is an ability used to get around having to take long detours in the open world or to cheese puzzles. If its restrictions were removed or reduced, you would see it being integrated into every raid tactic to become meta because it would enable a lot of mechanics, cheese, and break bosses. DK's Death Grip is extremely limited in use outside of PvP. Its raid use is tiny, as most things are immune to it aside from generic ads. It otherwise only exists due to how very limited DK's mobility is in open world content. FF14's Warrior gets the same thing but beefier in PvP, where it has good use, but healers get in PvE for saving teammates. Hunter's Misdirect in FF14 is a tank roll ability. Ninjas also used to have an ability that did the same tricks of the trade, largely rendered defunct outside of tank swaps due to changes in threat generation, so the DPS and healers did not need threat management and tanks no longer had to dance. Even in WoW, it's largely defunct outside of helping a tank build threat when you got a number of classes that can very easily burst their aggro meter up at the start of a pull, or open world use because the tank pet needs to actually tank for you. WoW feels more flexible, but in reality it is just as inflexible as FF14. Things that seem useful are heavily limited to where they are just a neat thing the class has held on to since its inception or from a certain expansion, because if it is removed you would see just how bare bones the class actually is at this point. Fluff for the sake of filling skill bars. I kinda agree that a lot of it is fluff, but not necessarily his example, but a lot of skills are fluff. I would say, look, for the most part, your rotation in WoW is like 4 to 5 buttons usually. Some classes is like 3. Okay, you rarely click anything else, right? So yeah, a lot of it is fluff. However, somehow you have 3 bars filled with fucking buttons. So it is what it is. Anyways, I think it's time to watch the video. Holy fuck.
Thing with raid buffs, right? I remember whenever I first started playing the game properly in my own account, it was like in TBC. And there, obviously, things are very different. I remember playing Wrath. I remember bring the player, not the class, literally as it was happening. So
that was never the case. Just because players were banned, didn't have information back then, that's the only reason. Look at TBC now. Everyone just brings the class, not the player. Like, everyone knows, right? That's the only difference. There was lack of information.
I'll bring the player, not the class, certainly went pretty extreme in that direction. And now they're in this situation where you kind of... Well, yeah, basically they want to move to a situation where in order to get the most optimal setup, you really should have all 12 or 13 classes in the game.
No, you don't. The most well, yes, classes. I mean, do you ever really need a paladin? Not really. Right? Like, unless paladins like overpowered, like holy paladins sometimes just like heal so much that like you might as well bring them, or paladin tanks are just like so good. But like, you never really need paladins. Like, let's be real.
Thinks it's friendly for both 20-man mythic and pugs too in a flex setting.
Ah, I see. So if you need 12 all 13 classes to be optimal, man, I can't wait to do some 10-man raids.
Happy. E.g., if you're a pug leader and don't have a warlock.
Again, you don't. If you really need something, I would say it's like warrior. You don't really need it, especially if you're doing 10-mans. It's like you don't really need a warrior. Let's be real. Like, the shout is an extra healing cooldown, but in 10-man, like, the damage probably is so low, like so much lower. You don't really need it, right? Unless you're trying to go on like one less healer, then you might bring a warrior, right, for damage. Warlock, most fights you don't need. DK, most fights you don't need. paladin, you never need them. If you have a shaman, you don't need a mage, right? If you have a mage, you don't need a shaman, right? So it's like, there are, but it's like, let's be real, you don't really need all 12 or 13 classes in one raid. You can forgo a few. The only reason you bring rogues, for example, is because you need melees, and they are mobile melees. Also, they have some immunities for soaks. Like, you don't really need rogues, you know?
You go get one. Same with every other class, instead of just getting a bunch of the strongest, ranged classes with no variation. So it's important that we are...
I'm not gonna lie, stacking 5 hunters almost into any raid is probably the best go-to. Soaks and free damage. Even if they're not top DPS, having 5 hunters is constant DPS.
We're broad in how we talk about this, right? Because if you go bring the player, not the class, what that will do is it will tremendously magnify whatever the current state of the balance is. Because all other things being equal, you want more throughput. If there are unique things, like maybe, I don't know, warlock cookies, getting your battle reses covered, getting your heroism, getting buffs and things, then it does, at the very minimum, guarantee that there is a reason to bring someone. Yeah. That's how they will see it. With this, it's not black and white. You know, we don't have to go all the way, bring the player, not the class, or bring the class, not the player. We don't have to go fully in either direction.
That's where you run into a pretty interesting problem and this is something they kind of talk about, but throughput is almost always the only goal a lot of the time, unless it's a necessary mechanic. Because a nice to have isn't what people look for, because you can't trust nice to haves to be used. It's like the example where when we were, I can't remember what dungeon it was. We did a couple of them, but with Luke, and he was DK, so he was just death gripping. And I'm just like, oh my god, having a DK is actually just bliss. But it's not like, it wasn't because he was a DK that mobs were automatically being gripped in. It was because that was a player who was playing a class that had an option, and that player was using the option correctly to go, okay, well, I know if I A-bomb them here, then all of these range mobs get pulled in, sweet. Or, if I death grip this one over, because this one's, it's going to run soon, or it's one of those ones that can't be interrupted. So, like, I can't mind freeze it, or he couldn't mind freeze it, or I can't, Avenger shield it. Pulls in, they'll look at that more efficient. It's like a smoother run overall. But that's the thing where you can't trust that to happen at, like, most levels of M+, or even some levels of, like, heroic pugs. Because I have definitely seen normal and heroic pugs where people don't use mechanics.
Oh, yes.
Like, I don't know when the last time I saw, like, another paladin use bop correctly. It's whenever I was playing in a mythic guild, and we were, like, basically all just memeing about parses, and, like, people were begging me for bop so they could parse on, like, a fight that they could stand in shit, or, avoid a physical thing. Or when I had spell warding, it was like, Matt, you need spell warding for this fight?
That's not necessarily the proper way to use bop, right? It's like you're using bop for someone to parse. It's not necessarily the best, like, it's a good way to use it. It's not necessarily, like, the proper way to use it, right? Proper way to use it usually is to reduce someone's damage, like, because they fucked up a mechanic, or, like, there's a mechanic that you need to bop for. That's what you need bop for, really. Everything else outside, it's like, it's cool to have, it's like, oh, well, you can avoid a mechanic for 8 seconds, wow, And by the way, the parse for that is not even, like, he's not doing that much more.
No, okay, well, use it on me here for this. I was like, that was the stuff that made it go smoother, but the only utility that can be relied upon reliably, good English, moron, but it's throughput, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you get class buffs. That's where you get, well, you want Arcane Intellect, because that'll make your number go up. Yep. Death Grip, that doesn't make number directly go up. It does if used correctly. Same with Shining Force. Same with, I guess Banish technically at times. Same even with, like, classes that can interrupt reliably.
How do you use grip incorrectly? Like, you used on a mob that can't be gripped just for no reason.
So say there's going to be a big stack of casters, so it would be nice to bring a druid because it'll solar beam it and it'll work really well, as opposed to, say, bringing a warlock who's just going to, have one spell lock or one interrupt. And that's the stuff that's like that. Those are like the intangibles, the incalculables. And people always just go down to, well, what gives me the big numbers? Or what is necessary in the case of when something goes over the line into feeling necessary, such as...
Well, if they're undead casters, then you could also bring a Holy Paladin for AoE stun, right? A Red Paladin for AoE stun.
AMZ.
Nope, never.
That's never going to be like necessary, but it's really nice and can definitely, because I don't know the amount of times a lay on hands is turned a wipe into a not wipe, because it's like, oh,
almost
we're
never.
out of battle reses, that healer's at 1%, there's tick times going, bang, lay on hands. And if you're fast on that, you, the player playing the class or piloting the class, became the whole thing.
That doesn't happen though. Like, let's be real. Like, 0.001% of cases this is the case. Like, lay on hands is just a whatever. Word of Glory, that healer, you would also get him to like almost 60% HP with one Word of Glory. If it crits, probably like 80%. It's like, that never happens. Right. Also, like, you're probably running, if it's a raid environment, you're probably running Selfless Healer. So it's an instant cast Lay on Hands and an instant cast Flash of Light. That's almost full HP on the healer. Let's be real. You don't need Lay on Hands.
But a lot of people just go, well, I think people forget a lot of utility and never talk about it because it's never...
Like, I'm not saying it's completely useless, but it's like, it's not that, like, Lay on Hands is really not that important. It's really not. It's nice to have, sure, but it's like, it's nowhere near as useful as any other utility in the game.
Essential. Whereas Death Grip kind of is. Or like when you're mythic raiding, it's like doing Agrimar, doing Agrimar without a bunch of Warlocks for Banish, Druids for Mass Entangle, and like Death Grips. Whenever I got that boss on Mythic, it was like, if we had a different comp, we wouldn't have done it as easy because of those intangibles. But you can't calculate those. And you can't make sure they're relied on every time. So you have this awful experience of, they're like, okay, we've designed a perfect system where you bring the player, not the class, but you also want to bring the class sometimes to find a nice balance in the middle.
No, they never designed a system where you want to bring the player, not the class. This has never happened. They always designed to bring the class, not the player. I don't know what world these guys live in, but it's like, it's never been bring the player, not the class. Like, they made the bosses on Mythic so hard that you have to bring specific classes to deal with mechanics, which I get sounds cool on paper, but realistically, dude, I'm a good player, but I don't want to play this class. It's not fun for me. Well, you have to if you want to participate. It's like, well, then fuck you, I don't want to participate. That's literally what it causes. Right? It's like, well, we don't need the Paladin. We need you to come Demon Hunter. We need you to come Druid or whatever, right? It's like anything but a Paladin. It's like, bro, sorry, I want to play a Paladin. Well, then we'll find somebody who is willing to do whatever we want in this Mythic raid, because that's how we get shit done. Because the bosses are designed for you to bring the fucking classes, not the fucking players. It's like, how is a red Paladin, who's supposed to be like bottom DPS in this tier, is outperforming everyone on damage? But we don't want the red Paladin because it's not good for the comp. Fuck off, right? It's like shit like this. Yeah, I'm talking from personal experience. Fuck off.
And then everyone just goes, Warlocks do 5% more damage, only bring Warlocks. And they're like, you fucking morons. But all of these other factors. And I'm like, what are the factors? Damage. And that's a little bit of like the player base.
I have no idea who, like, there's no one like that. It's like, I understand what he's saying, but no one is like that. Like, when rogues were by far top DPS, you would at most have like maybe 2 rogues on a run. Not 5. Not 10. At most 2. And when rogues were not doing damage because don't bring utility, no one brought them. But it's not like, well, just bring 5 warlocks because they're like the best in slot. This is TBC. What he's talking about is TBC. This is hunters and warlocks in TBC. This is not it right now. Because right now, so many different classes have utilities that's like you'll have to bring those classes.
This is faulted, but it's also naturally.
And it's
because you can't calculate how much more damage a well-timed, Avenger Shield does or well-timed Divine Tool does for interrupting 4 dudes once. You can't calculate that because it's only when things go wrong. And I've definitely went off on one here, but that's the thing. It's like, that's an important part of the discussion that I think people often ignore.
It's extremely hard. Yeah, it's extremely hard to get right. It's one of those situations where you can It's like I have this perception that it's really great to have paladins around because it's just nice and it's useful, and they have all of this just.
This is why you're not a mythic raider. No offense, but yeah, he's a heroic raider. Right? He's not a mythic raider. He even like explained some of the fuck ups he does in Mythic Plus. And I was like, how do you do that? Right? It's like, I thought you were better than this, but apparently not. You know, shit like this. It's like, so yeah, so, like I don't know how you want paladins. Like, dude, as a paladin, I don't want other paladins. You know, the only time I want other paladins is because like I like the spirit of competition and outperforming different paladins. But like, as far as like mechanics go, as far as boss fights go, like yeah, just don't bring any more paladins. I'm more than enough at this point. It's like I feel bad for being a paladin sometimes.
Nice little utility. Yeah, then a bunch
What
of paladins,
utility?
they actually feel like they don't have a thing.
Yeah, because they don't have something like a health stone, or a summon, or
anything.
intellect, or even though you've got devotion aura, you're like, well, Pal
You only
brings
need
that,
one.
Holy Pal brings that,
Yeah.
and Red are just like, we don't bring anything unique. Like you do,
No, you don't.
but you also don't,
Yeah.
perception wise, and
You don't.
best case scenario wise.
Realistically, or function-wise, you're not bringing anything useful to the raid as a red paladin. Prot paladin can bring the devotion. What's it called? I don't know what other aura you really need. All the auras are fucking useless. But yeah, so.
And it's always best case scenario because no one ever.
The only one that is not so you don't even need the Prot Paladin to bring the devotion because you have a Holy Paladin bringing the devotion because Aura Mastery would make the devotion give 20% reduced damage to the whole raid for like 5 seconds or some shit. I don't know. I don't remember how long Aura Mastery lasts. That's the only Paladin you want to bring. 20% damage reduction.
Ever plans for needing Bop or Freedom or Land Hands.
You never need
They're
it.
only nice when you never want one. When you
never really need
you
one.
never want it to be useful. And that's one of the important things that's kind of missed out of a lot of that kind of discussion and that kind of stuff. That I imagine they talk about it internally all the time, but as soon as it's out in the realm of players who approach the game in a different way than designers who approach the game in the
There are
design way.
cases where, for example, so here's like rare cases where you want a Prot Paladin, right? And honestly, you don't even really need a Prot Paladin for this, you just need a Paladin. So some bosses give you like certain stacks, and that's like the taunt mechanic, right? Where it's like you have 3 of this stack, and you have to switch to the other tank, otherwise the 4th stack will kill the tank. However, something if it's a physical debuff, that Bop will remove it. So in that case, you can have 1 tank. And honestly, if it is a Prot Paladin, what he can do is he can Bop himself, cancel Bop. He can take 3 more stacks. Then he can bubble himself, cancel bubble, and have 3 more stacks. So he can actually solo tank for a very long time. In between those like stacks, there's usually also like intermission mechanics. So usually the boss is not really doing any more stacks, and the tanks don't need to swap anymore. So then technically 1 tank can usually tank a boss for an extremely long duration if there's a paladin that can give him the bop and the bubble and stuff like that. But again, how often does this happen? Almost never. You know, it's like most of the tank swaps have to do with the boss, not with the tank, right? Like for example, when the boss attacks a certain target, he gets increased movement speed, increased attack speed. Once it reaches 20 stacks, you should probably swap off, shit like that, right? Where it's like your bop and whatever is not going to do anything for you.
And that's just like a natural set of assumptions and desires. It'll be different. That's kind of hard to deal with. So
Yeah, well, for the paladins, you are actually getting something. You're getting battle res, most likely.
Yay.
So,
Still not going to bring a paladin because of... look at all the other ones who have battle res. Warlock, Druid, and DK. Wow, you bring a battle res? Well, these guys bring grips, snares, long-ass silences, Warlock gate, cookies. Like, yeah, wow. Great, Paladin has a battle res. No one's gonna bring
are most likely
Paladins,
getting
man.
battle res, and evokers are most likely
Getting
going
lost,
to
who cares?
get heroism.
Bastards! Of course they are. They're healers.
Yeah,
Gotta get that. Gotta replace.
Dude, straight up, all healers should have battle res. And that's it. Just call it a day. If you're a healer, you have battle res. There. Problem done. You can bring all the healers as battle resers. No one else has battle res except healers. There, done. Then you don't have discrimination between healers. You don't have to bring a druid for a run, don't have to bring a DK for a run. You want to because of other shit, but you don't have to because of battle res. Like Mythic Plus is what I mean.
Yeah, Paladin's a battle res is nice, but it's still...
Fuck you gonna bring a Paladin for? A Balrus in a Mythic Plus? No, you'd rather bring a Druid or a DK, by far. A Balrus in a raid encounter? Let's be real, man. Like, you don't care about the Paladin's Balrus. Like, there's so many other people who can Balrus in the raid, like, you don't need a Paladin there. It's so useless.
Like, that's actually one of the things where that's nice, but it still falls under the same problem of... people do plan around battle reses because they're more important, but it's like, surely a Paladin shouldn't need a battle res, because a Paladin has bop, because a Paladin has sacrifice, because a Paladin has freedom, because a Paladin has lay on hands. That's 4 ways to make sure some motherfucker doesn't die. But you get a battle res to bring it up. And obviously I'd be super happy for battle res, because it's like, it would definitely go a long way to go, oh, play class, well, it was DK's a battle res, but you know, okay, that's actually pretty useful, that's pretty good. That's a nice addition. But also because
it would be a nice addition if Paladin were the only one with Balrus outside of healers. That would be a nice addition. But no, you'd still rather bring a DK or a fucking Druid in like almost all situations. Mythic Plus or Raid. This is what it is.
To do my sworn duty as a Paladin player and say that's not enough. We need more. We need a lot more. Give us more. It's
100%'s not enough. It's nothing.
I had an argument planned for why that wasn't enough.
It's
I think it was mostly the best case, where it's like that's not good enough in the best case scenario. We need something that helps us in the best case. We need what do we need? Can you just make sure we're doing most damage? And loot. Cheers.
Done.
And loot.
Easy. So
damage is utility, right?
So
actually, yes.
Here's the thing: if you don't bring utility, yes, your damage should be higher. Straight up, like, sure, I would agree with that. I would still rather have utility and like be a more fun to play class. But if you can't give us utilities, because right now what they're gonna do is, well, you got Balrus, so we can keep you like doing no damage outside of your wings, right? It's like, then take it away and give us more damage, give us more consistent damage. It's so dumb. There's absolutely no reason, right? Paladin's damage is so shit, and it doesn't bring anything to the raid. Why would you ever bring a Paladin?
Damage is utility because it is damage reduction because the boss dies faster.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, so if no one dies if the boss is dead, so that's utility. So yeah, damage is utility, we'll have more things.
I know he says sarcastically, but like, it's true though. Not necessarily like what he said. It's like, oh, boss dies faster than whatever. No, but it's true. If you're not bringing any utility, then fuck it. Give us some damage, right? Everyone else has either utility or a lot of damage, or both, honestly. Like, look at fucking rogues and warriors for the longest time, right? It's like top of DPS. Oh, no problem. Here's also utility. Right, it just doesn't make any sense. Anyways, that's the video. I'm starting to disagree with Matt and Bellular more and more. I don't know why. I mean, I know why, but their takes are bad lately. I don't know. Maybe it's the Dragonflight copium. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, anyways, that's the video. See you in the next one. Peace.